Europe woke up to a shock it never expected. On a cold morning in the year 711, bells rang in panic across the southern lands of Europe. Messengers ran through stone streets. Kings argued. Armies rushed too late. An army had crossed the sea, and it did not come from Europe. It came from Africa. At the center of this moment stood one man, watching the sun rise from a burning mountain, his ships destroyed behind him, his soldiers trapped between the sea and an unknown land. His name would shake history. But first, everything could still be lost. The flames rose high into the dark sky. Wood cracked. Smoke filled the air. Sailcloth burned like paper. On the rocky shore of the southern coast of Europe, African soldiers stood frozen in fear as their ships disappeared into fire. The sea that brought them here was now gone. Some whispered in terror. Some cried out in anger. Some wanted to run. Then the commander stepped forward. He was not dressed like a king. No golden crown. No heavy armor. Just a simple cloak, worn boots, and eyes sharp with purpose. He looked at his men and spoke words that would never be forgotten. Behind you is the sea. Before you is the enemy. There is no return except through victory. The mountain beneath his feet would later bear his name. Gibraltar. Jabal Tariq. The mountain of Tariq. But at that moment, no one knew if his name would be remembered or erased forever. Because if he failed, history would never speak of him again. Long before the fire, before the ships, before Europe even knew his name, Tariq ibn Ziyad was born far from palaces and crowns. He came from North Africa, from a Berber people who lived between desert winds and mountain stone. His early life was hard. Food was earned, not given. Strength mattered. Loyalty mattered more. He learned to ride before he learned to read. He learned discipline before comfort. And he learned something else: how to survive when the world is against you. At that time, Africa was not quiet. Empires pushed and pulled across the land. Arab rulers spread a new faith. Old powers fought to keep control. Berber tribes were often treated as tools, not equals. Tariq rose through this storm not by birth, but by ability. He became a soldier, then a leader, then a commander trusted with impossible tasks. But nothing was bigger than what came next. Across the narrow sea to the north stood a powerful land, the Visigothic kingdom of Hispania, what we now call Spain and Portugal. Its cities were rich. Its churches were strong. Its kings believed their borders were safe. But inside, the kingdom was rotting. The king had died. Nobles fought over power. The army was divided. And the people were tired of heavy rule. Whispers of weakness traveled across the sea. Tariq heard them. So did his commander, Musa ibn Nusayr, the governor of North Africa. The idea was dangerous. Cross into Europe, with a small army, against a kingdom that believed itself untouchable. Many said it was madness. But history is not changed by those who wait. Have you ever heard the phrase, burn your boats? It's a powerful statement about committing to a goal with no turning back. But did you know this iconic phrase comes from a real, world-changing historical event? Let's travel back to the year 711 AD, to the shores of what we now call Spain, and meet the man behind the legend, Tariq ibn Ziyad. Imagine this: a massive army of Berber warriors, led by their brilliant general Tariq, crosses the narrow strait of water separating North Africa from Europe. This very strait would later be named after him, Jabal Tariq, or Tariq's Mountain, which we know today as Gibraltar. They land on the Iberian Peninsula, a land ruled by the Visigothic kingdom, a realm teetering on the edge of civil war and internal conflict. The Visigothic king, Roderick, had seized the throne, creating deep divisions among the nobility. Some of these disgruntled nobles, seeing an opportunity, may have even invited Tariq's forces to intervene. Tariq, a governor under the Umayyad Caliphate based in Damascus, wasn't just there for a small raid. He saw a chance to claim this vast, fertile land for his empire. His army was skilled and disciplined, but they were vastly outnumbered. King Roderick, upon hearing of the invasion, gathered a colossal force, some say as large as 100,000 men, to crush the invaders. Tariq, with his much smaller army of around 12,000, was facing impossible odds. This is where the legend takes hold. As his troops watched the Visigothic army gather on the horizon, fear began to creep in. Their escape route, the ships they arrived on, lay waiting in the harbor. Seeing this wavering resolve, Tariq made a decision that would echo through history. He ordered his men to burn the ships, every single one. As the flames licked the sky and smoke billowed from the shore, he addressed his soldiers. The message was clear. The sea is behind you, and the enemy is in front of you. By God, there is no salvation for you but in your truthfulness and your patience. There was no retreat, no going back. It was victory or martyrdom. This single, audacious act transformed the psychology of his army. Fear was replaced with a fierce, unbreakable determination. They were no longer just invaders. They were men fighting for their very survival, with everything to gain and nothing left to lose. The two armies finally clashed at the Battle of Guadalete. For days, the battle raged. Tariq's smaller, highly motivated force fought with a ferocity the Visigoths had never witnessed. They were organized, agile, and driven by a singular purpose. The Visigothic army, despite its size, was fractured by internal loyalties and weak leadership. In a pivotal moment, some of King Roderick's own nobles, who secretly opposed him, deserted the battlefield, causing his lines to collapse. King Roderick himself was killed in the chaos, and his grand army disintegrated. This victory was not just a battle won. It was the key that unlocked the entire Iberian Peninsula. With the Visigothic leadership shattered, Tariq's forces marched onward. City after city fell, from the southern plains all the way to the northern mountains. They took major centers like Córdoba and the capital, Toledo, often with surprising ease, as many local populations were tired of Visigothic rule and offered little resistance. Within just a few years, almost the entire peninsula was under Muslim control. This marked the beginning of Al-Andalus, a period of nearly 800 years of Islamic rule in Iberia that would profoundly shape the culture, science, art, and architecture of Spain and Portugal. It was a golden age of learning and tolerance, where scholars of different faiths collaborated in cities that became beacons of civilization. The story of Tariq ibn Ziyad and the burning of the boats is more than just a military tale. It's a timeless lesson in leadership, commitment, and the incredible power of removing your own safety net. It teaches us that sometimes the only way to move forward is to make it impossible to go back. The war was over, but Tariq ibn Ziyad did not celebrate. As the sun rose over the fallen Visigothic capital, banners of victory moved slowly in the wind. The streets were quiet, too quiet. The sound of battle was gone, replaced by whispers, prayers, and fear. Europe had fallen faster than anyone believed possible. And that was the problem. Because when a man wins too quickly, too completely, he becomes dangerous, not to his enemies, but to his allies. Tariq walked through the city on foot. No guards surrounding him, no golden armor, just dust on his cloak and tired eyes. He saw things others did not. Homes abandoned in silence. Church bells no longer ringing. Nobles hiding behind locked doors. This was not just conquest. This was collapse. The Visigothic kingdom had not been defeated only by swords. It had broken from the inside. Years of injustice, power struggles, and broken trust had weakened it long before Tariq arrived. Some city leaders came forward and offered peace. They handed over keys. They asked for protection. They asked for fairness. Tariq listened, and that alone changed history. Instead of burning cities, Tariq made agreements. Instead of destroying churches, he protected them. Instead of ruling with fear, he ruled with law. Local people were allowed to stay. Farmers returned to their fields. Markets reopened. For many, life did not end. It stabilized. Word spread fast. Too fast. Life is safer under the new rule, some said. He does not steal, others whispered. He listens. And that was dangerous. Because powerful men fear nothing more than a leader who earns loyalty instead of forcing it. Across the sea in North Africa, Musa ibn Nusair listened to reports. At first, he was proud, then confused, then uneasy. Tariq was supposed to lead a raid. A test, not conquer half a continent. Letters arrived describing victories that seemed unreal. Cities falling without long sieges. People accepting new rulers without endless resistance. Tariq's name was being spoken more than Musa's. And Musa was the governor, the superior, the man who answered to the highest authority. Power has a sound, and Musa could hear it shifting. Musa crossed into Europe himself, leading another army. Officially, it was to support the campaign. Unofficially, it was to take control. When the two commanders met, history held its breath. Tariq stood respectfully. He bowed. He spoke with humility. But Musa did not see humility. He saw a shadow growing too large. Some accounts say Musa shouted. Others say he struck Tariq in public. What is certain is this: something broke between them that day. From that moment on, Tariq was no longer just a hero. He was a risk. Together, they continued the campaign. Northward, deeper into Europe, cities surrendered, roads opened. But behind the victories, tension followed every step. Orders were questioned. Messages were delayed. Credit was redirected. Official reports began to change. Tariq's role was reduced. Musa's name grew larger. History, even while it is happening, can already be rewritten. Then came the order, a message from the highest authority. Both men were summoned back. Immediately. No explanation. No praise. No celebration. Just a command. Return. Tariq obeyed. He had always obeyed. But he felt it now. The silence after glory. The moment when a warrior realizes the battle has changed. Because courts are colder than battlefields, and words can be sharper than swords. The journey back was long. Across land, across sea, through cities where his name was still spoken with respect. But respect does not protect you in halls of power. When they arrived, Musa was welcomed. Tariq was questioned, accused, delayed. Some records say he was blamed for acting without permission. Others say jealousy spoke louder than truth. What is clear is this: Tariq was pushed aside. No new command. No reward equal to his achievements. The man who changed Europe was quietly removed from the center of history. Years passed. New rulers rose. New stories were told. Al-Andalus flourished. Science, architecture, learning, and culture spread across Europe. But Tariq's name faded. Not erased completely, but softened, reduced to a footnote. A mountain, a crossing, not the man. And yet, something strange remained. In European records, the sudden collapse of the Visigothic kingdom never fully made sense. In African memory, Tariq's fall from power felt unfinished. In the land itself, place names whispered his presence, as if history tried, but failed, to forget him. Because truth has weight, and buried truth always pushes upward. Near the end of his life, Tariq lived quietly. No throne, no palace, just memory. Some say he died poor. Some say he was watched. Some say he never spoke of his victories again. But one question refused to disappear. Why would the man who opened Europe be pushed into silence? What threat did he truly pose? And what did he know about power, loyalty, and empire that others did not want remembered? In the final moments of his life, a witness records Tariq saying only one thing: history does not belong to those who win battles, but to those who write what comes after. And with that, the greatest conqueror of his age vanished into shadow. But the shadow he left behind was still moving. Because in Europe, a new world was rising. And its foundations were built on a story that was never fully told. And next, the truth returns, through lost records, hidden names, and the legacy no one could erase. Because you cannot conquer a continent and disappear by accident. The world moved on. Empires always do. But history does not forget easily. It only hides. Years after Tariq ibn Ziyad disappeared from power, Europe was no longer the same land he had first stepped into. The old Visigothic kingdom was gone, not even a memory strong enough to frighten children. In its place rose a new society, Al-Andalus, built slowly, carefully, stone by stone. Cities changed. Cordoba grew from a provincial town into a city of light. Its streets were paved and cleaned while many European capitals were still dark and muddy. Lamps glowed at night. Libraries filled with books. Scholars debated mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and law. None of this was supposed to happen. Conquerors were expected to destroy. Instead, something new had been planted. And at the root of it all was a man history tried to shrink. Official chronicles spoke carefully. They praised governors. They praised caliphs. They praised systems. But Tariq's name appeared less and less. When it did, it was brief. A general. A subordinate. A man who followed orders. Yet the land itself told a different story. The mountain where he landed still carried his name. Jabal Tariq. Gibraltar. You do not name the gateway of a continent after a nobody. Local stories survived where official records faded. In villages, elders spoke of the first soldiers who arrived and did not burn crops. In towns, families remembered agreements written instead of massacres. In old churches, records showed protection orders signed during the conquest. These things did not come from distant rulers. They came from commanders on the ground. From Tariq. Even his enemies respected him. Some Christian chroniclers wrote with surprise, even confusion. They expected cruelty. They recorded restraint. They expected chaos. They recorded order. One wrote that the invaders did not behave like destroyers, but like rulers who expected to stay. That sentence mattered, because it revealed intent. Tariq was not there for glory alone. He was building something. But building something lasting makes powerful enemies. Back in the centers of authority, fear had already done its work. A foreign general, from Africa, beloved by soldiers, respected by civilians, victorious beyond expectation. That combination has ended many lives. Removing Tariq quietly was safer than honoring him loudly. No martyr, no rebellion, just silence. And silence worked. For centuries, European history books focused on kings and crusades. African history was fragmented by later empires and colonial rule. Islamic history centered on caliphs and capitals. Tariq stood between worlds. So he was pushed into the cracks. Yet influence does not vanish just because a name fades. Al-Andalus became a bridge. Knowledge traveled through it. Greek texts, preserved and translated, reached Europe again. Medicine advanced. Surgery manuals circulated. Mathematics crossed borders. Algebra, zero, algorithms. Architecture changed. Arches rose. Gardens bloomed. Water flowed through cities by design, not chance. This was not accidental. It was the result of a foundation laid with discipline and respect. The kind of foundation a thoughtful commander sets. Centuries later, when Europe began to rise again, it borrowed without admitting it. Universities appeared. Hospitals formed. Navigation improved. The Renaissance did not rise from nothing. It rose from contact, from memory, from stolen light. And that light passed through a land first opened by Tariq ibn Ziyad. Modern historians began to notice the gaps. Why did early sources contradict later ones? Why did administrative systems appear so quickly after the conquest? Why was resistance lower than expected? Why did soldiers settle instead of loot? Each question pointed backward, toward decisions made in the first months, decisions made by one man. Some researchers returned to North Africa, to oral traditions, to family lines, to overlooked manuscripts. They found traces, small but consistent, a pattern. Tariq was not erased because he failed. He was minimized because he succeeded too well. Because his story challenged a simple narrative of conquerors and conquered. Because he showed that leadership could cross cultures. Because he proved Africa did not only supply labor or resources, it supplied strategy, vision, command. In modern times, his story began to return. Not loudly, but steadily. In classrooms, in documentaries, in quiet corrections at the edges of textbooks. Each mention restored a piece, not to glorify conquest, but to tell the truth. That Europe's history is not isolated. That Africa shaped it. That one man, standing on a burning shore in 711, changed the path of two continents. Tariq ibn Ziyad did not wear a crown. He did not found a dynasty. He did not live to see his legacy praised. But legacy is not always applause. Sometimes it is survival. Sometimes it is influence that outlives names. Sometimes it is a question that refuses to disappear. Who really conquered Europe? A general from Africa, leading a small army, who understood that fear fades, but systems remain. That power taken by force dies by force. But power built with order lasts. History tried to move past him, but the land remembers. The mountain remembers. The roads remember. And now, so do we. Because the greatest victories are not always the loudest. And the most dangerous men are not those who seek power, but those who change the world without needing it. The African king who conquered Europe was never crowned. And that may be why his conquest lasted longer than any throne ever could.